When I hit post, my hands were shaking. It wasn't because I was afraid of what people would say. I had long stopped caring about their whispers. It was because of him, because I knew once those words went live, there would be no going back. It took exactly 3 minutes and 41 seconds for him to disappear. His profile photo vanished. His number turned gray. Messages stopped delivering. And just like that, he was gone. Ethan. The boy I thought I could finally love in daylight. I stared at the phone screen, feeling the world collapse into silence. Notifications buzzed. Comments began to pour in. Some supportive, others cruel. But none of them mattered. All I could see was that single word under his name. Blocked. I met Ethan 2 years ago in the most unexpected way, during a late-night film screening at the campus theater. He was sitting 2 rows ahead, head tilted slightly as the flickering light washed over his face. There was something about him, the quiet way he laughed, the way his eyes glowed when the screen turned blue. After the film, I accidentally bumped into him at the vending machine. He smiled and said, "Guess we both needed sugar after that heartbreak." That was Ethan, always turning awkward moments into something warm. We started talking, then hanging out, then falling slowly, dangerously, beautifully. He wasn't out, not even close. Ethan was the golden boy, top of his class, basketball team star, everyone's favorite. I was the art major who sketched feelings I couldn't say out loud. At first, it didn't matter. We found corners to exist in. His car, the empty art studio, late-night drives where we'd hold hands just long enough before headlights passed. He used to whisper, "This feels real," and I'd believe him. But real things don't survive in shadows forever. When the rumors started, someone had seen us at the lake one evening. Ethan panicked. "We have to be careful," he said. "I don't want this to ruin everything." Everything. That word haunted me. To him, everything meant his reputation, his family, his team. To me, everything was him. Still, I stayed quiet. For a long time, I told myself love was about patience, about waiting until the other person was ready. But love, real love, shouldn't make you invisible. One night, after months of silence and secret meetings, I wrote a post. It wasn't even explicit, just a picture, the sunset at the lake, our shadows overlapping, and a caption. "To the one who taught me love is both light and hiding." I didn't tag him. I didn't use his name. But everyone knew. Because love, no matter how quiet, always leaves traces. Within an hour, my phone lit up with messages. Some friends were supportive, some curious. But the one I waited for never came. Instead, the screen turned cold. Ethan offline. Then gone. The days after felt like walking through fog. Everyone around me wanted a story. What happened? Who was he? Why would he block you? But how do you explain losing someone who was never fully yours to begin with? At night, I replayed our moments. His laugh echoing against the car window, his hand tracing shapes on my palm, the way he'd look at me before saying goodbye like it hurt to walk away. He used to say, "Someday, I'll tell them. I just need time." And I gave him that time. But when I finally told the world, he gave me silence. I tried to move on, deleted the photos, archived our messages. But healing isn't as simple as pressing delete. Love leaves ghosts, in playlists, in certain shirts, in the scent of his cologne that refuses to fade. Sometimes I'd see him across campus. He'd avoid my eyes, pretending to be busy, surrounded by friends who probably didn't know a thing. The first time our eyes met again, it was like the air cracked open. He looked scared. And I realized maybe he wasn't angry. Maybe he was just terrified of being seen, of being known, of losing the version of himself he built for the world. A few weeks later, I found a note slipped under my dorm door. No name, no signature, just handwriting I could recognize in my sleep. You didn't do anything wrong. I just wasn't brave enough to stand next to you. I read it until the ink started to blur with my tears. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream, to say he betrayed me. But the truth was simpler, sadder. He was just scared. And maybe so was I. Because telling the world about us wasn't just about declaring love. It was about fighting for the right to exist for both of us. Months passed. I focused on my art again. I painted the feeling of silence, the color of heartbreak, the warmth of love that once was. My final piece for the semester exhibition was titled Unsent. It was a painting of two figures standing in the distance, almost touching, almost speaking, but separated by a thin, transparent wall. People loved it. They said it was emotional, raw, haunting. They didn't know it was our story. Ethan came to that exhibition. He stood quietly in front of the painting for a long time, hands buried in his pockets, head bowed. I didn't go to him. I just watched. When he turned to leave, our eyes met again. This time, he didn't look away. And for the first time, I saw something new in his expression. Regret, yes, but also peace. That night, I got a message from an unknown number. Saw your painting. It's beautiful. You're beautiful. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't reply. Some love stories end not with closure, but with understanding. And maybe that's enough. Because even though he blocked me everywhere, even though we couldn't last, what we had was real for a moment. And that moment, brief as it was, will always be mine. He didn't text again after that night. The silence that followed was almost gentle, like the space after a storm, when everything is broken but still standing. For a while, I thought that was the end. But life has a strange way of circling back. A year later, I moved to another city for graduate school. New people, new air, new rhythm. I thought I'd left the past behind, but sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of someone who laughed like him, or hear a song he once hummed under his breath, and it would all come rushing back. I learned to live with it, the quiet ache of a love that never finished. It didn't hurt as sharply anymore. It just lingered, like a faded scar you can't stop touching. Then one afternoon, out of nowhere, I saw him again. It was at a small cafe near the university library. I was sitting by the window sketching strangers for my art project, when the doorbell jingled, and there he was, Ethan. He looked older somehow, not by years but by experience. His hair was shorter, his face leaner. The lightness he used to carry had been replaced by something steadier, quieter. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he smiled. A small, cautious smile that said, I didn't expect this either. He ordered his coffee and walked over. Hey, he said softly, like the word was made of glass. Hey, it was all we could manage. He asked if he could sit, and I nodded. We talked about school, work, friends, ordinary things, as if pretending the past didn't exist could make it less real. But it was there, pulsing between every word, every glance. At one point, he looked down, fingers tracing the rim of his cup. I saw your latest work online, he said. The series about silence. It's powerful. Thanks, I murmured. It's what I know best. He gave a sad smile. I deserved that. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. The truth had already been painted, displayed, and archived in the hearts of strangers. Then, quietly, he said, I came out last month. I froze. My pen slipped slightly in my hand. He exhaled, shoulders trembling just a little. It wasn't easy. My parents didn't talk to me for days. The team was divided, some were supportive, others not. But I'm free now. Scared, yeah, but free. I looked at him, at the same boy who once whispered I just need time, and realized he'd finally kept his promise, even if it was too late for us. I'm proud of you, I said, and I meant it. We talked for hours. About who we became, about what it took to survive that silence. He told me he'd seen my post that day, the one that started everything. He said he didn't block me out of anger. He did it because he couldn't bear to see the world knowing something he wasn't ready to admit to himself. I was terrified, he confessed. Of them, of me, of what it meant to love you. I wanted to say that love shouldn't require courage, but maybe, for people like us, it always does. When the cafe started closing, he stood up and smiled. It's good to see you again. You too. We hugged, brief, uncertain, but real. And when he walked out, I didn't feel the old ache anymore. Just warmth. Maybe that's what healing is, not forgetting, but remembering without the pain. A few weeks later, I received a letter. No name, no address, but I knew the handwriting. I used to think love was about hiding, about protecting it by keeping it secret. But now I know, love is about standing beside someone even when the world isn't kind. Thank you for teaching me that, even when I didn't deserve it. There was a small drawing folded inside. 2 figures standing under the sunset, holding hands this time. For the first time in years, I cried not from heartbreak, but from something gentler, forgiveness. Years passed. I graduated, started working at a design studio, built a life that was mine. Sometimes I'd still think of Ethan, not as a wound, but as a chapter. One evening, while walking home, I saw a mural painted across a city wall. It stopped me in my tracks. 2 silhouettes under golden light, their hands almost touching. The same image I once painted in unsent. At the bottom corner, there was a small signature I recognized instantly. M. Ethan Mitchell. He had become an artist too, in his own way, turning memory into color, regret into light. I stood there for a long time, smiling through tears. Some stories don't need a reunion. Some loves don't need to return to be remembered. Because sometimes, loving someone means letting them go, and wishing them a life where they can finally stand in the sun without fear. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: the world may not always be ready for our truth, but that doesn't mean our love is any less real. I told the world about us once, and it broke everything apart. But maybe, just maybe, it also gave us both the freedom to become who we were meant to be. And that's something no block, no silence, no time can ever take away. Months turned into years, and the ache that once lived in my chest softened into something quieter, something almost tender. I learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to live with the echoes and letting them remind you that you once felt something beautiful enough to hurt for. I stayed in the city after graduation, teaching art classes for teenagers who spoke in colors more than words. Many of them were just like me once, afraid of being seen, afraid of loving out loud. Sometimes, when they'd ask why I always painted sunsets, I'd just smile and say, because that's when everything changes. It was during one of those classes that I met him, Noah. He wasn't like Ethan. Where Ethan was composed, careful, and full of golden quiet, Noah was all laughter and light. He worked at the community center next door, helping with youth outreach programs. The first time he saw me, I was trying to clean red paint off the floor with a paper towel. He knelt down beside me, handed me a rag and said, "You know, art doesn't have to suffer to be real." I remember laughing, really laughing, for the first time in what felt like years. Noah was simple in the best way. He didn't overthink love or hide behind hesitation. When he liked you, you knew. When he cared, he said it. When he wanted to hold your hand, he did. At first, I resisted. I told myself I wasn't ready, that I was still haunted by a story that had ended long ago. But Noah didn't try to fix me. He just showed up, every day, in the little ways that matter most. He'd bring me coffee during morning classes. He'd wait outside after work just to walk me home. He never asked about Ethan, but one night, as we sat on a bench watching the city lights blur beneath the rain, he said softly, "Whoever he was, I hope he knows you're still glowing." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. One afternoon, while cleaning out an old storage box, I found the letter Ethan had sent, the one with the sketch of two figures holding hands. I held it for a long time before deciding to frame it, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of growth. That night, I told Noah everything. Every word, every scar, every part of that story I'd buried under quiet smiles. He listened without interrupting, without judgment. When I finished, he reached for my hand and said, "You loved him, and that's okay. That's how you learn to love at all." Something in me broke open then, not in sadness but in release. I realized I wasn't betraying Ethan by moving on. I was honoring him, because the best way to respect a love that couldn't last is to make sure your heart still knows how to love again. Months later, my art studio hosted a gallery show called The Things We Leave Behind. It was a collection of pieces inspired by memory, shadows, reflections, unfinished conversations. The centerpiece was a large canvas painted in soft amber tones. It showed two figures walking in opposite directions beneath the same fading sun, each carrying a small light in their hands. The plaque beneath read, "To the ones who taught us love, even when they had to leave." During the opening night, people lingered around that painting the longest. Some saw heartbreak, others saw hope, but for me it was both. After the crowd thinned, I stepped outside for some air and froze. Across the street, beneath the flickering glow of a lamppost, stood Ethan. He was holding a small bouquet of wildflowers and wearing that same soft, uncertain smile I remembered from years ago. I walked toward him, heart pounding but steady. When we finally stood face to face, it felt like no time had passed at all. "Hey," he said. His voice was older now but warm. "I saw the flyer. I had to come." I smiled. "I'm glad you did." He handed me the flowers. "These reminded me of that lake. Remember?" I nodded, unable to stop my tears. "Yeah, I remember everything." We stood there in silence for a long time. There was no bitterness left, no regret. Just two people who once shared a love that changed them both, and had finally made peace with how it ended. He looked at me and said, "You look happy." "I am," I answered truthfully. "And you?" He hesitated, then smiled. "Getting there." Before leaving, Ethan glanced toward the gallery window where my painting hung. "That piece," he said softly. "It's us, isn't it?" I smiled. "It's everyone who's ever loved and had to let go." He nodded, eyes glistening. "Then thank you for making something beautiful out of what broke us." We hugged one last time. No promises, no tears, just quiet gratitude. As he walked away, I realized how rare it is to see an ending so clearly, so gently. Most people never get that chance. But I did. And that night, when Noah arrived to walk me home, I didn't look back. Weeks later, I received a postcard from another city. The handwriting was familiar, looping, and careful. "I'm starting over. I'm teaching art at a youth center. They remind me of us, brave, scared, but trying. Thank you for helping me find the courage to live honestly. E." I pinned it above my desk. Every time I looked at it, I felt a quiet pride. Love doesn't always end with a forever. Sometimes it ends with freedom. Years passed again. Noah and I moved into a small apartment filled with sunlight and messy canvases. Our love was ordinary in the best possible way. Morning coffee, shared laughter, late-night painting sessions. And every once in a while, when I caught the sunset turning gold through the window, I thought of Ethan. Not with longing, not with sorrow, but with gratitude. Because he was the beginning of the story that taught me how to write the rest of it. If someone were to ask me now whether I regret telling the world about us, I'd say no. Because even though it cost me something precious, it also gave me everything that followed: the courage, the art, the peace. Sometimes the truth breaks you, but sometimes it breaks you open. And that's what love is supposed to do. One evening, years later, as I stood before another exhibition, I noticed a familiar name in the list of contributing artists: Ethan Mitchell. His piece was called Becoming Light. When I finally saw it, I couldn't breathe. It was a painting of two silhouettes beneath a sky split between night and dawn, reaching toward each other, not in sorrow, but in celebration. At the bottom corner, written in tiny letters, were 4 words that made my chest tighten. We made it, finally. I smiled through tears. Maybe we had. Maybe, in our own ways, we both did. Because love isn't always about ending up together. Sometimes it's about becoming whole apart. And standing there, under the gallery lights, I realized something simple and profound. He had found his light. And so had I.